Today we're going to talk about Mesoamerican and Andean civilizations. And the first thing I want you to think about is that we're going to be talking about the region of Mesoamerica. So Mesoamerica is a region that includes southern Mexico and northern Central America. This was the first site in the Americas for farming settlements. Warm temperatures, lots of rainfall, and rich volcanic soils made for fertile crops. And they grew things like maize, which maize is like corn. Eventually, they grew things like squash, beans, and farming allowed a lot of the people to create large cities, complex social structures, and advance culturally. So what you need to understand about Mesoamerica is that it's going to exemplify or show show examples of the 5 key traits of civilization that we learned about in Unit 1. So as you can see, we're going to learn about the Mayans, the Aztecs, and the Incas. And the Incas lived in South America. Looking here, Aztecs, Mayans. The Mayans will live right here. And then the Incas live on the west coast of South America. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the Mayans, and the Mayans were located in Central America and in the southern area of Mexico. So see where that red square is, and Tikal is their largest city, and it had 100,000 people total. It's a large amount of people during this time. And they developed around 1000 BC. And at its height, it consists of potentially like 10 million people amongst like 40 cities. So this is a large civilization, large empire. As you can see, the Mayans were known for architecture, and this area right here is the Celestial Observatory, which means observatories like which you observe the stars. It was the largest structure in the Americas until the late 19th century, so 1800s, and it's 14 stories. It's a temple. Now, the rise of the Mayans, they're going to have the classical period, which ranges from 300 to 900 CE. They built enormous, like, stone cities. They had no wheel or metal tools. They had observatories, and they charted the movement of the moon and stars and planets, which is going to be very similar to Islamic cultures when we learn about that, how they use the moon and the stars and planets. Also, I want you to think about later, we'll talk about exploration where they use the moon and stars, and we even continue to use the planets, stars, and moons with lunar cycles and things like that. They also had highly accurate calendars. So when we talk about Mayan social life, one thing that you understand is that you do need to draw this pyramid in your notes. The class structure is pyramid shaped, so that helps you understand that there is a social hierarchy. The first is going to be the ruler, then you have nobles and priests, merchants and artisans, peasants and slaves. Remember, rulers would be like a king. And when we talk about kings, they had a lot of power and great influence in Mayan society. The Mayans believed that the kings communicated directly with the gods, which is very similar to the mandate of heaven. They believed that it was a divine force, and the Maya worshipped many gods and believed that they, influenced daily life. So rulership in Mayan society was a big deal. You can look, this is an image here. So you can see the king, nobles here, merchants, artisans, peasants, which would be the lower class, and then slaves, which probably have no rights or any type of rights in Mayan society. Now, when we talk about Mayan politics, you have a ruler, which would either be a king or priest. So remember, if there's a priest involved, there's a theocracy within their government. We'll wait for the bell. There are close relationships between spiritual and political leaders. Like I told you before, kings were considered that they communicated directly with the gods, and they maintained power through military coercion, which pretty much means military force. That means if you didn't do right, they were going to force you, harm you, or make an example of you to keep order and obedience in their society. They established a tribute system, which dealt with a system of goods and people from those who they conquered. And so what a tribute system is going to be is it's going to be a tax, pretty much, like you pay with goods and things like that. And they had many independent states in the Mayan Empire civilization. Remember I told you that after a while there's over, how many was it? Well, I think like 10 million people amongst 40 cities. So you have to see that it was very expansive, and they were predominantly farming communities. Now, coercion, I just want to review real quick, is the practice of persuading someone to do something either by using force or threats. So I want you to think of it like, if you don't pay your tribute or you don't follow directions, we're probably going to kill you or break your arm or harm you, so that you will continue to follow the rules of the Mayan civilization. Now, when we talk about the Mayans and their environment, they are going to use rain. They built their cities so that their rain would gather in large reservoirs. You have heard of the word reservoirs with Egypt. Reservoirs are going to allow for irrigation, which means bringing water to crops. They believed in agriculture, so they were farming communities and cities. They drained their swamps. They cleared hillsides, which means that it was terraced. So I want you to think of terracing is going to look like steps. And what you do on the flat part of the step is that's where you grow your crop. When we talk about the population, the Mayans completely used their environment to be sustainable, and they supported their population, which eventually got up to like 5 million and then eventually 10 million people. When we talk about Mayan culture, they are going to have beliefs and rituals. They had polytheism, which means there was 160 plus like gods. So they worshiped many, many gods. They believed in human sacrifice as well as animal sacrifice. So, they believe the gods influenced everyday life, and to prevent disasters and keep the gods happy, the Mayans performed private and public rituals for the gods. One common practice was involved in offering blood to the gods, usually by a piercing of the tongue or the skin. Also, they played a ball game, and teams that lost, they usually lost their lives, and their hearts were like given to the gods, like sacrificed. They had a sacred calendar. They also used mathematics and astronomy, like we talked about with the planets and the stars and the moon. They had a writing system, which was called glyphs, like Glyphs. It was a system of symbols, very similar to the cuneiform, and also they had like sort of a form of hieroglyphics. Now, when we talk about the Mayan economy, what you need to understand, like I told you, is that they are a farming community. They had terraced in the highlands, and so remember I told you it's like a step. Like they farm on the flat part of the step. Also, they use slash and burn farming, which slash and burn farming is going to be a method where you burn vegetation to clear the land for planting, like the specific plants that you want to grow. And terraced farming is going to deal where they built flat terraces into the hillside. So it was kind of elevated, but it looked like steps. Also, one thing that the Mayans will do is that they will trade with other cities, and that is going to connect and influence their regional trade networks. They traded birds, precious stones, food, goods, clothing, things like that, those items. And as far as the fall of the Mayan Empire, the empire collapsed around 900 CE. Why? We're not really necessarily sure why. There's no clear written records of why the Mayans had a decline. Scholars think there could be a number of factors. They believe it could be environmental damage, drought. The population may have been too big to feed. Maybe that they were fighting amongst themselves, having warfare, civil war, warfare with other areas. So those are the theories of the Mayan Empire. And these are Mayan cities, as you can see in the picture here. So one thing that I want you to notice is that the Mayans in green are very close to the Aztecs. And we're going to talk about the Aztecs in another video.